All right, here we go. It is May 29th. I believe it is Memorial Day, and we are still at the Junkyard and Brewery. We had a great day yesterday, and it's going to tie into today's topic. We ended up meeting other people. There's this app that we're connected with called Harvest Host, and this is a Harvest Host. And so the other RVers were there, and we ended up running into a young couple, which is so we're finding, we've been on the road since October, and finding people that are younger driving a Class A motorhome with a baby is a rarity. And yesterday we had the blessing to have them be show up and enjoy the day with them, and they are on a quest to um, they are people who are really questioning the blueprint. They're questioning like what they should do, who they should be, and it just turned into such a great conversation because they were open, and then they were offering us insight in how they look at things. So we felt we introduced them to the slingshot idea, and and um, they didn't disappoint in also giving us content and concepts that had us looking um, at things differently with different language, and it was so cool. So again, I'm James. This is Chelsea, and this is Slingshot number 3, I believe. And we're having so much fun with this, and it feels like we're just this is very improv, and we do write down like little snippets that we want to talk about as we're going as like little reminders, but in the setup to doing it, we're not having big long discussions and saying what we want to do with it. This is improvised. And we want to make it that way because that is how the now is, and how we can all operate from the present moment, and just whatever comes out. And that was part of our conversation last night with the young folks was um, not having the worrying thoughts of, for them it was, they're really in that place in life where they worry about making the wrong choices in their lives, and very mind centric, and but they knew that this was something that they wanted to change about their behavior and how they're experiencing it, and they were very open about and vulnerable about pressures from parents, what people are going to think about them in doing their own thing, and ended up being a wonderful experience. And so there's going to be some of the things we talk about in today's that'll come directly from the conversations we had last night, and then just our conversations and this morning, and sharing it with you. And again, we are open to people connecting with us either by on these live streams. We've got to get better about getting these advertised. We haven't really done that yet, but it's kind of cool because we're not waiting to be perfectly ready to do this. It's like we know how to do the set up a camera and go live, and we're doing that. So, do you want to say anything before we get cracking?
Yeah, that even just taking um, this approach is us walking the walk of letting the heart lead the way rather than the mind getting to critiquing and constructing. So we're letting the heart lead, and that's why why it feels maybe a little um, improv-y.
Yeah,
Yeah.
improvised. Improv is more fun though, so we'll go with yours. So we'll start out with it's about like one of the major themes is holding the strongest lens that you can hold. And so as this young couple was sharing with us their the struggles that they come from, from parental to careers to what they're supposed to be doing at their age, the cultural phenomenons, and really the major theme that was over was in the conversation was not worrying so much about what you believe to be true, but rather how to focus the lens on how you think, how you're seeing the things that you're trying to move forward with. So one of the young people was talking a lot about uh, the anxiety of how to making the right choices and trying to make choices from the moment rather than they admitted that it's like 15 to 20 minutes of being scared to make the wrong choice about something stupid, like should we stop at a car wash, um, as an example. That's not what they said, but is it the right car wash? We'll be able to do this, we'll be able to do this, and just this obsessive mind. And so the strongest lens that we were offering was just making sure that you're always holding the lens that is going to push you to the place where you want to get that mind that you want, that lives in the now, that lives in the present, and pushing forward, um, because you still are developing this and developing these skills. But it's paradigm B. They really like this, and they even said when we introduced the idea of paradigm B, they were like, we understand paradigm B, but we've never heard the words. Like you finally given us words, like the thing that we want to move towards is this thing. And so we were talking about like what it is, and we gave them a magnet that has the simple B on it, and telling them that to get out of paradigm A is a slug fest because you are using the lens of paradigm A to get to paradigm B. So you constantly, you can kind of evolve, but then you can go right back into the looping stories. Paradigm B, the simplicity of paradigm B is keeping the lens on paradigm B. And really, that is the focus to get to B, is to focus on the lens, not to focus on beliefs, not to focus on, particular beliefs. Should I believe this? Should I cling to these beliefs? It's no, I'm not going to put my mind into holding a belief. I'm going to continue looking at that belief from different perspectives until I find the most beautiful way that I can look at a belief, rather than just clinging to the belief and hanging on and holding it to be true. And then, the belief obviously, or I say obviously, but it's not so obvious in paradigm A, the belief ends up becoming an identity and you're attached to something, um, and then you start taking points of view that are downgrading and like, life is suffering and I'm not allowed to be happy. Like I've got to be a good person. I've got to be the hero of the. I've got to find a way to be the hero of the story, and those are all, well, depressing from my point of view now. Points of view, because it's kind of like I'm here to be a martyr. I'm here to be a martyr for the rest of humanity. And actually, let's bring up, my daughter was given in her ethics class a problem to consider, and the problem or the situation was, there's a person who goes to a food, what do they call them,
Soup
a
kitchen.
soup kitchen, and they go there and they love the experience of doing it. And then there's another person that goes there, they absolutely hate the experience of doing it, but they go and they do it because they want to serve.
Mm-hmm.
And so the question was, is one of those people more ethical than the other one? And it was such a great, it was a great question because the her and her boyfriend, my daughter and her boyfriend, had differing opinions on it. And then when we started discussing it, it was an interesting one because you have to determine what is being ethical, and it has to do with morality. It's staying in alignment with with morality. So then the question became, once we all kind of, we didn't give each other, Chelsea and I didn't give each other um, feedback as to like how we came to our decision, but we came to different decisions. But then we talked about like, how did we come to that? And I said, if you go by a static or a pre-digested idea of morality, then it doesn't matter. Both of them are being equally ethical, ethically, morally. But if you were to go to determine morality from a point of view of you acting in a moral way but not pre-digested, then Chelsea was saying that then the person who's going and doing it uh, that hates it is really, and I'm going to use her term, which I think she'll light up when I say this, they are transgressing against themselves.
Yes.
And that transgression against themselves from the point of view of morality coming from the present moment rather than being pre-digested rules for morality. And then we had somebody else that we offered this to, and they were saying kind of the same thing, that first of all, it's kind of ridiculous because the person who doesn't like it can find there's a million ways to serve humanity, and they can go out and find something that they actually enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, yeah, so and this is where we talk about, this is the idea of suffering, is there's these pre-digested ideas of being a moral person, and then from that point of view you've got to do whatever that pre-digestion says, and if you suffer, then you suffer, but you're doing your job, and
Mm-hmm.
basically you're living out the martyr archetype. And then you've got to have the head down, the chin down point of view, which is life is suffering, and we all just got to suffer, and we got to make this a difficult time.
I'm reminded, a good example is when I was very young, as a young child, being told I had to go to church on Sunday. And it was the actions of, having to go, that I didn't like it, but that was the moral thing to do. And so as long as we would show up Sunday morning, then we were moral. And that's what we're talking about.
Very good. Yeah, it reminds me of, I was forced to go to church, and um, I can still remember 52. 50, I'm 52 now, and that was back, in when I started really paying attention to awareness, and I just remember being in church and just despising seconds. I loved my wristwatch because I would literally play mind games with myself as to like looking at the clock. Then I would like look away from it for just a few minutes and just praying to see some time being taken off. And I never took the martyr archetype. I never felt like me being in church was doing any good for anybody, other than appeasing the person who wanted to take me to church or felt that it was necessary to take me to church. Well, I understand their point of view and why they felt that they needed to do that, but that was because they were under the impression that paradigm that was they were living under one paradigm, which was paradigm A. That is the popular um, notion. And so, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say that. So these types of scenarios and things that we have in our early development is kind of creating a construction of, um, in order for you to be moral, you have to do something that you may not like. And it's this, it kind of goes in direct contradiction to then the words that you're reading. If you're reading in the Bible saying, come with a cheerful heart, and I'm like, well, my heart's not cheerful, so I'm doing it wrong. So then we create these contradictions and these push and pulls within us, and it bleeds over into how we go about, helping in our community. And the soup kitchen's a really good example of, someone wanting to serve but not enjoying it, well, then it's not really a serving. And so then the person who's loving it and enjoying it, that is the aspect of the serving that, I don't know if I said that quite right, but
I'm just going to leave it alone and just trust that it is perfect in what needed to come out in that moment. Yes, and that was these younger people. They're right around 30 years old, and they're going through this push and pull on what they should do, and kind of getting caught up in the corporate world and being an employee and having employers that are pointing them towards money, and that's what they need to do. And they're like, I want to like serve the customers. And they're like, we don't care about that part, we just want you to sell as much as you possibly can. With what do they love to do? And they were talking about the thing that they love to do. And so I was considering something else when you were speaking, was that even the person who is going to the soup kitchen and it's not liking it, there's another way. I would also point that that's part of the process of moving to be is, there's going to be things that aren't going to be the funnest things in the world that you can do. Change a spare tire, or I mean a flat tire. I had a recent issue with changing a battery out, and I just thought, oh man, this is going to be a day long project. And I had screwed up in the beginning, so it put me on this path of unknowns. And I was just like, oh man, this 5 minute fix could take me all day long, because I've got to, trace wires where they go and blah blah blah. And what I did in that moment was refocus. I refocused my lens, because I realized, like, I'm going into something that, it isn't exciting, to um need to fix something, especially something that's not really making a big difference in my life. It's just basically fixing a little problem, but it might take me 6 hours to do this little tiny problem, or, fix this little tiny problem that's really not going to make this big difference. And I recognized that my mind was doing that. It was saying, and and then and it's also because I don't have a very strong understanding of electricity. I can get along and I can make things turn on and off and have a basic, but not this deeper level. Anyway, I refocused the lens in doing that, and I just made things exciting. Uh, each any time that I would do some, okay, then I'd say, okay, well, what do I got to do first? Okay, I've got to get um the battery put into and secured into the vehicle. Okay, so I ran into a problem doing that. And so I was like, oh boy, like I couldn't get the bolt down inside of it. And I was like, okay, I started getting frustrated, and I was like, okay, no, 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 I'm not going to do that. I'm going to refocus my lens, and I'm going to be like, okay. And I got more present, and and then I just kind of I stopped trying to force the bolt into the position, because thinking I could just get it. If I could just get it in there, I could tighten it down, and everything would be good. And I slowed down and I took a breath, and I was like, oh, I kind of looked at this little piece of plastic that I had to set down into this groove. And I went, oh, let me check it. So I checked the other side, and then I checked the other side, and it was a kind of a triangular prism, and I had it off, just one turn off. And all I had to do was turn it one turn. It set right in, and the bolt just slid right down. And then I celebrated to myself, ah, yes, I got something done. And I started enjoying that moment, and enjoying the process. And it was, a sick, I thought was going to be, could have been an all day project, turned into 10 minutes, just because I chunked it down and I moved it. So going back to the idea of focusing the lens to the strongest position that you possibly can in any given moment. And it's how we can train our minds to do the same thing. Because if that is what happened to me when I realized, call it a traumatic experience. I've dropped a nut and been like, oh my God, this one little tiny nut is going to hold up this whole project because I don't know how I'm going to find the nut or get it out of a place that is, I have to take the whole engine out or whatever, whatever. I've had those experiences before, but I caught myself going into a narrative about this being, oh God, I'm going to have to trudge and I'm going to have to get through this and blah, blah, blah. And I just recognized that that narrative wanted to take over my mind and my thoughts. And I went, shift it, just shift it to, okay, how can I do this? I shrunk the task down into little tiny parts, and I had a great time. And then when I got it done, I was like, vroom, the truck start or the rig started, and I was just happy as could be. So that leads to another the other point that I thought was a major theme about having a lot of interaction, maybe a few hours last night with our friends. And one of the themes was we were just like bombarding them with all these cool ways and giving them language that they were just like, oh my gosh. And you could kind of tell, I could tell with body language and what they were saying, like, oh my gosh, I want this mind to get where you're at, and I want to get to paradigm B. And it just seems like this is going to be such a difficult task, and I'm always worrying. And I was like, and just anytime that I felt that, I just kept saying the response was, how exciting. Like, how exciting that you get to do this, that you get to change your mind and move your mind into something else. Because the point was is that they were looking at it as like, I need to have this all done right away, like by tomorrow. And it was like, no, the only thing that's stopping you from really shifting this in a meaningful way very fast is the lens in which you see it. And so it's shifting that lens to excitement and reframing things, nervousness,
Mhm.
as excitement rather than nervousness. So my example of that from my big switch was when I started doing things like, I mean, these things that people know me now are just like, oh, you just do these things. We're talking stand-up comedy, acting. I did live acting shows. I did improv in front of audiences, and they just now assume that everything was just so easy. It's just so easy for you. And no, it was not easy for me. I got nervous. Um, I would forget my lines. I would get butterflies. I went through all of those things, but I had heard from things that was listening to, was retraining those thoughts to, this is excitement. This is not nervousness. And it worked because I what I was literally doing was just changing the narrative that I had going on in my head. If before it was like, I would pre-digest. It's like I would have a show, and I'd be thinking about the show, and I'd start getting nervous about my nervousness. And so hours before I should have been getting nervous, I was already getting nervous about the nervousness that I was going to be coming up to. So what I recognized was those, and I recognized better if I reverse engineer it, it was simply that I was playing this narrative, pre-digesting that this is going to take place when I get there, and then having this, but I want to not have this. I want to be one of those people that doesn't have that nervousness and blah, blah, blah. And then it was a story, and I was living in this story that was just looping. It kept me looping, and then I started telling myself, "I'm excited." And then if I started pre-digesting, before the show, I'm going to be nervous, I would be like, I'm going to be excited. I can't wait to get to the part where I'm excited. Just before the curtain comes open, I'm going to get real excited. And what ended up happening was, the way I would describe this is it, and this is something that I had to go through was that nervousness still existed in my body and in my cells. But as soon as I started rewriting the story, that nervousness that existed in my body and my cells started to shift and change. And it took a little bit of time for my body to literally catch up with my mind. And then I wasn't experiencing that. And and people would tell me, do you, or people would say later on, once I start getting really comfortable, people would say that nervousness, those butterflies don't go away and you don't want them to go away. And I was be like, well, that's not my experience.
There's a electricity with those butterflies that we can tap into, and we can um, uh, ramp up or use that energy in our excitement and our delivery rather than be resistant to it. And so a lot of times we're nervous or we get into worry. It's because the mind is overworking and not shifting into an excitement and a playful, let's use this energy and see what blooms from it.
All right, very good. Yes, it's just reframing the whole thing and allowing that excitement to come in. Though one of the things in my experience was that I started to notice that I was showing up for shows and I didn't have that excitement, and because I was associating the excitement with the nervousness.
Mm.
And all of a sudden the nervousness went away and I didn't have the excitement. So I had to reframe it again. And so people ask me, like, what do you do before a show? How do you prepare yourself? And what I did is I began having a mantra before every show that just before I would go on stage, I would meditate just quietly. I'd find a spot somewhere to meditate. And when I mean meditate, I'm just saying that it's more of an affirmation, I guess, than a meditation. And the affirmation was recognizing that the audience, the people who had paid to come and see what I was doing and performing, had spent their time to come and spent their money to come and experience this experience. And so I began to reframe it as making it important. So I'd made and then I would take their excitement um, and import it into my beingness, jump up and down. It kind of reminded me, that was one of the things my mentor gave me was, before you go on stage, especially with improv, do a little dance, jump up and down. It's like you're like literally shaking the energy and moving it or getting it moving rather than having it trapped.
Mm-hmm.
And I began to do that. So that is a really, really strong um, lens corrector, is being excited and looking at things from an exciting position than to look at it um, as nervousness and dealing with it. And that's the thing. It was very interesting because they were giving us examples. This young couple last night about how their friends and family like would tell them that they would reinstall this fear, like, aren't you scared of the thing you're doing? Aren't you, like, they were
I'm so
trying to.
worried
Right, yeah, and it's
for
like
you.
you have to recognize that people are going to project their fears onto you and try to get you back into the narrative that they want to live out. And so it's not a matter. Oh, and that was another very interesting thing about this person was they recognized that they didn't really want to. They used different words, but they didn't want to be the rebel. They just wanted to figure out what theirs was. They didn't want to. They didn't need to go against the grain. I used an example of counterculture and culture. And I remember having this discussion with a teenager years and years ago where he was kind of considered by the class to be the rebel. And so, oh, here goes our door. It's going to shut. Um, the rebel, the counter. So I said, so we started talking about the counterculture and the culture. And I said, who do you think controls the counterculture? And this teen got it. It was like, oh, it's controlled by the culture. Yeah, as soon as you start taking a position of anti things, you are being, you don't realize you're actually being controlled by something else. It's like we in this young person last night realized, like, I want to do my thing. Like, I don't know what my thing is yet, but I want to do my thing. And then we talked about the fact that we're going into this new paradigm of reality, and we need, I think we talked about this yesterday, about it's going to be weird. Like, Chelsea and I wake up a lot of times, I think I said this yesterday, is, and we're just like, we're weird. Like, we're doing weird things. We're doing these videos. We're um driving around, staying in junkyards, and
Ice
uh
caves and volcanoes.
yeah, and just making choices that don't seem to fit the normal scenarios. Um and the reason that we keep doing this is because both of us trust that whatever it is that's supposed to emanate from us is the thing that is going to be helpful for the world.
Mhm.
And it's not a matter we're making these videos because we feel like, this is something that's absent and we need to do this, and this is how we're going to be the hero and how we're going to change the world. It's like, no, we're just doing this because this is a thing that seems exciting for us. Like, this is, you can see that I'm excited as I'm telling these stories, because my creativity, what brings me the juice of life, is looking at things, looking over situations, and then refocusing and revisiting it, looking at from a stronger lens and a different point of view. And so that's where my excitement is, and this is a way that um, I can express that, or at least that's what it seems like now. And I'm real excited that if we get an audience, or when we get an audience,
Mhm.
that you will have that excitement to go along with it, and I love that feeling.
Mhm.
So yes, and I also wanted to say that I love agreement, and what just flowed through me as I was saying it was that, challenge us. And I can say challenge me. I don't want to speak for Chelsea.
Oh, challenge me too.
Yeah, like,
Yeah.
you don't, this doesn't have to be. We want to be this to be more cooperative, because that's what paradigm B is. But if I can't answer questions, you know, then I might just be full of shit and don't listen to me. So, there are lots of different ways to look at the world, and there are lots of different points of view. In fact, I'll go to a interaction that I had on on social media, where somebody was, what I was saying was, um, stop framing something as good or bad. And they came back and said, because I said, stop doing it. And the reason I didn't do it, I had the experience that this other person had, but I chose to not call it bad. I chose to call it challenging. And my response was, it's I wasn't going to traumatize myself and get myself caught up in a narrative of, oh, I had a bad this. And the worst part is, I understand that if I take that position and then I go around the world, or, go in every situation, and I tell people this was my experience, just, it's like people are ready to tell what they're fearful of, what their trauma is. And I recognize that if I'm doing that, I'm a troll. That's all I am. I am out there to try to feed my fear into somebody else. And their point of view was, oh, well, you didn't actually have the experience then, because if you had the experience, you wouldn't be saying the thing you said. And my response was, well, that's one perspective that you can take. Um, but I said, comparative suffering is not inaccurate, does not lend to an accurate guideline. Like, you can't say that what a bad this is, and then look subjectively at all the other people and say, oh, everybody who says that they had a bad this had the same experience.
Mhm.
Like, you may be saying I mean, maybe you had a much more awful one, but now you've got somebody saying, well, I had a bad one. And then you're like, and theirs wasn't even that bad. And it was ridiculous. And it was, but they just like the confirmation that they fit in somewhere, that this thing is bad. And it's like, I just want to tell people, like, do you look one step further? Like, where does you sharing your, this is, I had this bad thing, like, what does that do to yourself? Where does that limit you? And then how does it limit other people that you share it with? And that's one of my points was, is this group is supposed to be like courageous and moving and challenging themselves. And I've recognized that this community is a bunch of whiners. And as soon as you go into, like, somebody said, I had a bad this, they start to say, oh gosh, and oh, you need to, like, take years, and I'm so sorry that this happened to you. And it's like this victim mentality. And you're like, this is not courageous. Um, this is just transferring pain onto other people and transferring suffering. And the thing is, go
It's
ahead.
bolstering, and what's happening is that we all get into wanting confirmation on where we're sitting with a feeling. And so if we're sitting with a bad feeling, oh, I had this happen to me, it's bad. This is wanting confirmation rather than moving ourselves through it in a different way, because it does take some energy. It takes a little bit of uncomfort to not go the route of seeking the confirmation of all the agreement of other victims around us. So in the instance that we start breaking from that that confirmation group, that agreement, we're it's going to be a little uncomfortable, but that's that shift that we're talking about as far as the adjustment of the lens and finding a much better lens through which to experience everything.
Perfect example. And in paradigm A, you can totally understand when people say that life is about suffering, you understand why it's about suffering, because paradigm A says you must suffer.
Yeah,
And then everybody goes out and
everybody
says, I
agrees.
suffered this way. And so I'm going to pass my pain on to you. And then that person passes that narrative on to another person. And you just see it, like, it is happening egregiously in our culture. And that's the beautiful thing right now. People are taking this kind of downtrending idea of how they're seeing this egregious um, discombobulation in our culture. But there's another way to reframe that, is you could see the dysfunction. It's out in broad daylight. Like, people are saying, you need to be a martyr, you need to suffer, you need to work hard, you need to put your boat, tie up your bootstraps and get moving. And it's all about passing on suffering. And that was one
I
thing.
paid, so you have to pay.
I paid, so you have to pay. And that's what really, when we look at the political polls, is that those people are coming from resentment. A lot of people say, well, I worked hard, and that means you've got to do the same thing, even though we don't live in the same era. We're not like, we don't need to work. And, like, we have this idea of jobs, that everybody has to have a job, and this is the thing. And it's just this story that comes back, because hard work does feel good. I'm not saying that isn't a good motivator,
Mm-hmm.
but people that's what we're trying to force now, is a narrative that the jobs that we're doing need to be to get an economy working, rather than to have happy people, to actually be on this earth, to enjoy this earth. But no, you've got to sit in a cubicle, put in your time, and do your thing, so that you suffer, so that somebody can have a video game turned on quicker, or whatever it is, or whatever. And it's really what it is we are in a time, paradigm B is coming into fruition. And we're going to see that there's, like AI, there is so much that is that AI can serve for us. We were just talking about this with trucking. Chelsea brought up the electric uh, trucks, and then I brought up the self-driving aspect of these electric diesel trucks. They're not diesels; they won't be diesels anymore. They'll be electric. But the thing about one of the big, huge things about them is they'll be driverless someday. So boom, there goes 2 million jobs. Boom, and there will be they won't have to stop. They can drive as much as they want, and then since they will have everything operating on themselves, they can piggyback. So they will have less. They'll have to use less energy than the ones that they do now. And there's going to be all kinds of things that that this artificial intelligence can do for us. And but the exciting part is to use that technology, to see this technology. In fact, I have this written down as one of the things we were going to talk about. We just went into it, was that this is coming, but people are going to the fear part of it, and oh, it's going to take away the jobs. Good. Hopefully it'll take like the jobs that we don't need to be doing, so that people can enjoy. And that's the thing, is it's not focusing just on being hard work. Like, we have a school system that I was raised in that was meant for one thing, and that was to educate me to build the economy,
Be a worker.
to be a worker. And we can move into paradigm B, where we don't have to do that, where we just like, we all recognize that we have a unique gift that comes through us. This is what I'm discovering about, is looking at these things, bringing this new technology and looking at it differently, so that we can make this transition, because it is a hard transition. If you think, let's look through the point of view of the people that are mad about paradigm B coming in. In fact, that the young couple brought that up, was like, yeah, there's a lot of people that aren't ready for it. And you can understand their resentment, was because they were raised. I was raised under the, like, if you work hard, and then they did all of this stuff, they just don't see how exciting it is that they can tap into those things, the things that are unique about them. It doesn't matter how old you are. I mean, they're 30, and both Chelsea and I were just like, oh man, oh man, oh man, you're so far. Like, you have 22 years, like, younger than us, and you're talking to people, and you're looking at the world so different than either one of us that did at the age of 30. And it's like, you just have this oyster that is just ready to come into it. But there's people that are older than us that are just like, no, it has to be the old way, we gotta do it this way. And you can understand that, because it was like, people, let's look at it from, it wasn't, it like, they did it, and they refocused the thing that they were doing. They did it from pride. And but then all of a sudden, this new generation come in and said, we don't want to do your thing. And so you can see why, like, look at it from a beautiful position, and not look at it, them as being evil or trying to hold, or working just from resentment. It's like, they found this thing, they reframed it, and they made whatever it was that they did, they made it prideful. And but the only thing that they're attached to is that that is the only way to move forward, is to reframe it to, whatever you're doing, have pride in it. And it's like, there's oftentimes, like, just the young couple last night was talking about a job, and he wanted to be customer based. He wanted to sell people the right products that they needed and everything else. And the company just said, no,
He
we
was
don't
wanting to
want
be
that.
a relating, and the company was like, we want numbers.
Numbers.
And so that's a real good example of those two different paradigms bumping into each other.
Right. And so he couldn't even, so how can you take pride in something that that is not, doesn't have pride in it? And
Mhm.
it's because we're all in this together. We're all in this transition to this new paradigm. And it's like, that's the thing that, like, how do we start the conversation with people that are under this impression? Because they're the ones that are kind of doing the, no, Ed, you're the worst generation ever. Blah, 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 blah. And it's like, no, it's like, we all have to just refocus our lens, and say it from a different way, is like, you know talking to people and just saying, have you ever talked to somebody that's found their gift and their creativity, and you look at them, and you see joy in their face when they talk about the thing that they're doing.
Mhm.
And um And it's just, and that's a brilliant thing. And it's like, put that seed, those are great seeds to seed with people. Is look, instead of looking for all the things that the people are doing wrong, it's like, look at the things that they're doing right. Are they happy?
Mhm.
Are they waking up excited to live life? There's a lot of different ways to see the world, and it's being able to not be shut down, and to continue moving forward, and bumping up that lens.
Humility is something that kind of comes up for me just right in this moment, that it's it's up to each of us individually to determine whether an idea is going to be a good idea or a bad idea, or something that doesn't feel right. When we have to get to a very honest point where we believed and we bought into whatever that idea on what success was, on what a good daughter or a good son is. These are ideas that, the job, the mortgage, the debt, you're a good, you're a good citizen if you hold this amount of debt. These are ideas that we decided at one point or another that we were going to go ahead and put our belief into. And it takes humility and honesty to be like, that's a that's something broken. That's something broken that I chose to put my energy into. So it's a responsibility and a humility to be like, okay, I did that. But now I want to put my energy and my gifts into something different.
Very good. And I guess one of the things that I was thinking as you were talking about that is just offering to people, like if they have a hard opinion about something, and it's just to say, have you looked down the lens of that, if the thing that you believe should be true, like where does that lead to? Is that leading the world into a bigger and more beautiful place, or is that leading to just confirmation that you did the right
The right
thing,
thing.
and
You're
that
right.
other people need to do that right thing too? And also, just some people don't even take the second to realize that the world has shifted aggressively away from that point of view. So, like when I went to college, I can give you an example of what I'm talking about. An anecdote is college was darn cheap. Um, and, student debt was not a problem for me. And that isn't coming from having, parents that paid. I got a few little grants, but when you're paying $1,000 for a university a semester, that's different than today when kids are paying $10,000, $12,000. And, how could you say to, like, the example is the one that I was a teacher. And it's, how do you say, oh, you want to be a teacher, just work hard, and um go get your college degree. It's $10,000 a semester. That doesn't include your dorm and your living fees and all of that stuff. So what are you out? Let's say minimum 60 grand. And then if you look at how much it would cost you a month to pay $60,000 back with the interest rolling and everything else, and then you recognize that a teacher makes under $50,000 a year, I just think, like, how does this equate? It doesn't equate anymore. Even if I had run a little bit of student debt, it would have been easy back in my day to repay those loans. I did take a little tiny loan, but that was just for a computer. And I paid that back. But like, how do you say that when when you have a $600, $700, $800 a month student loan, plus you have this rising cost of um, housing, and everything else is way more expensive. 40 something thousand dollars a year ain't going to cut it anymore. I paid $80,000 for my house, and I could say, yeah, your teacher salary, I had a 3 bedroom, 1.5 bath little house. And, you could say, well, that's what a teacher deserves, is that's it, is 4,000. But I could afford that back then. And, I just sold a house for smaller than the house I lived in, um, for way more than that. That even a teacher's not going to be able to afford that. So it's just a matter of leading people to that, like, where does your point of view lead to? Does it lead to paradigm B? Does it lead to something more beautiful, or does it lead to you passing your suffering along to the next point of view? Then I did the suffering, and now I have the success, and these people aren't even happy all the time. They're not even contented, um, and that's what all of this is about. Is that we can live in a contented state, and that was kind of like that was what I was. The idea came to me about, can we be happy all the time? And I recognize that I'm not happy all the time. Um, but with the way my mind works now, with refocusing, I spend I spend in my life now, I spend the considerable amount of time in my life in what I would consider contentment. Um, and then outside influences can bolster me into happiness. And then if I'm aware that I want to be happy, it's like, oh, I see that person smiling, or oh, I see a dog. It's like I can I can reframe myself now and my mind and be happy. So I can go from almost all the time being at least at a contented state to happiness whenever I want. And then when I am with company, I am joyful and passing along my happiness to the people that was kind of, what we experienced yesterday. It was like, even the employees that work here, I asked him, how was your day? And he said, well, I just love it when I have great customers. And I had great customers today. And I was like, well, I know I was trying to be a really good customer for you. And it was because I just, like, went in with the idea that, like, they had to apologize. That's what I loved about being here yesterday. We ordered the most delicious, it took a long time to get it, a quesadilla. And but then they came out and they were like, so apologetic. We're so sorry. We've run out of tortillas. We got to go to the store and get tortillas. And I said, I said, don't you apologize. I said, we're on your time. We're on your time now. We're here to just enjoy this time. If it takes a little longer to get that quesadilla, we're gonna just love on that quesadilla, which was the truth. And then they went and made it even special for us, put a little bit of their amazing brisket in it, and um, and yeah, it and so I just know. That's the thing, is that I know that paradigm B, you can live in paradigm B, and it is a different point of view. And so I wanted to speak just a little bit to this idea that I've seen was people coming from A trying to go to B, and they will say um, that they're kind of lifeless when they try to reach the present moment, and they're not finding enjoyment. And that's and so it's another lens correction. You're seeking contentment. You're seeking with being okay with whatever happens. And um and it's very different. And that's the other thing that was realizing. I don't remember if I talked about this, was that I was so lucky that along my path, when I had a mentor for about 10 years, was that he always reminded me along my path that this doesn't need to be taken seriously. Like, that is a big point. I mean, there was a time I had on my business card that I am helping people with terminal seriosity. And and that's one of that is a big key. A refocusing key is, man, chill out. Like, you don't have to take it seriously. You don't have to take getting into the now seriously. And if you're seriously doing that, you're most likely not in the now. That's the irony. It's a piece of irony there. So I feel that this video is wrapping itself up. Chelsea, do you have anything that you wanted to add, or you want to say goodbye?
I have a poem that I would have to go get it. to read, but it's a poem that I'll share next time.
Oh, that's a great idea. That's
Yeah.
a good idea, is that we'll take a note and we can share that with you. And that'll kind of be one of the things to either remind us what happened today, because that's the thing, is we forget about like what we even do the next day, because the theme in our minds shifts so quickly these days that we forget what we're doing. But we'll make a little note for tomorrow and
Hmm.
we'll share that poem with you, and then we'll see if that poem kicks us back into to diving back into this idea,
Hmm.
or we'll see what it does. So glad that you came in here and watch this video again. Connect with us, social media, website, paradigmb.org. Want to hear from you. We are your biggest fans, moving from Paradigm A to Paradigm B. Love you. Have a great day.